Give us a big round of applause for Teju.
How's everyone doing? Thanks a lot, Brian, for inviting me. Thanks a lot, Bethany, for having us all here today. This is a real pleasure. It's an honor to be amongst such brave and capable innovators. To hear all the ideas that are floating around in this room is really, really exciting and really inspiring. So I'm really humbled to be here. And somebody made the mistake of giving me 40 minutes to talk to all of you. So hopefully I don't bore you to tears in that time. But I'm here to talk a little bit about being unreasonable, and Bethany and Brian were interested in getting a sense of what we've observed as being characteristics of successful entrepreneurs. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The sort of outline for the evening looks a little bit like this, and I'd really like to start with just what brings us here. And so just out of curiosity, I'm wondering, why are people in this room? What is it that brings you to this community or brings you to this evening in particular? Is there something that you're looking to get out of this, something that maybe I can speak to? Anybody willing to share a little bit about what brings them here at all? Yes, sir.
It's the energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I can feel it too. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, sir.
I think that it really happens a lot when you hear the word no so much that you give up. And when you hang around people that have heard that and still overcome it, I think that's very important.
So persisting through failure, dealing with rejection, pretty difficult stuff, but apparently necessary for entrepreneurship. Absolutely.
Rejection, and just not stepping back and retrying it.
Definitely.
Giving up way too quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Linda.
I came here to meet you.
That's great. Well, I'm honored. Thank you very much. It's always interesting for me to begin with this question, just to get a sense of, who's in the room, what people are interested in, and I'll answer this question myself. Why am I here? And the answer is my mother, quite literally, and also figuratively. Here she is with my sister. And the reason that I'm here because of my mother is because when I was 3 years old, I had a very life-altering experience with my mom. And basically what happened is one day I woke up and I realized that my mother had been doing my laundry this entire time, my whole life. And I was like, that's not okay. I'm 3 years old now. I'm a big boy. I'm going to start doing my own laundry. And so I gathered up all my clothes from my room and took them to the washing machine. And being probably this high at the time, I couldn't really reach the washing machine. So of course I went to the kid-friendly version and put my clothes in, added some detergent and all that, started the automatic spin cycle, and then there was some commotion that prompted my mother to enter the room and wonder what was going on. And this day, both my mother and I discovered something deep and fundamental about human beings, which is that all of us have a drive to do our own laundry. In other words, all of us have a desire to be agents in our own lives, masters of our own fate, people who take things into our own hands and are capable of doing them ourselves. So it was that day that my mom decided she better teach me how to do my laundry. And this is important, especially later in my life when I went to India with my family around age 10. And the fellows have heard this story, so I'm sorry for the repetition. But my mom and dad and I were walking through this bazaar, and this little kid who was about my age came up to me and my parents and asked my dad for some money. And so he reached into his pocket to pull out a few rupee notes. And while he was doing that, I was watching this kid, and he wasn't excited about the prospect of getting a couple of rupees, free money. He was ashamed. He was incredibly unhappy about the situation. And I'd been to India before, but something struck me about this moment, because this kid was exactly like me. For the first time, I wondered about the stark difference between us. So I asked my dad, what's going on here? Why is this kid in this situation? And how come we're here in this bazaar shopping for clothes? Why am I not on the street begging for money? And my dad talked to me about the concept of poverty for the first time. He talked to me about inequity that exists in society. He talked to me about the lack of opportunity that some people face that others are more fortunate to have. And I thought about it as we walked along. I saw more and more people begging, more and more people sleeping on the streets. And 10 minutes later, I turned to my dad, who's a physician, and said, you know, you're a doctor. You've dedicated your life to the study of disease and illness and eradicating those things from society. I probably didn't use multi-syllable words, but that was the gist. I said, is there anybody who does this for poverty? Is there anybody who studies poverty and works to eliminate it from our society, a doctor for poverty? And my dad said, I don't think so, son. And I said, well, that's going to be me someday. That's what I want to do with my life. But the question, of course, is how? I'm a 10-year-old kid. I barely have a 6th grade education at this point. I'm relatively, powerless to do much about all of this. And so all I could do was try to learn, to ask questions. So I asked everyone I could, every adult that I could meet, teachers that I had, my friends, anyone I could talk to who would be willing to entertain this question. What can we do about a problem as massive and as enormous as poverty? And the answers that I got were characterized by this cartoon, which I'm not. Can everybody see it in the back? Basically, it's a math professor who has an equation. He's come to some brilliant conclusion, and the middle step is, and then a miracle occurs. And what I think is revealing about this cartoon is we know where the world is today. We know what it looks like. We know what we want the world to look like. What we don't understand is the in-between, the step 2, how to go from the world that we are in today to the world that we want to see. And people have told me in rare cases that this shift occurs. But if it does occur, it's miraculous. It's because of those rare few individuals who history sometimes graces us with, who operated at the fringes of human capability. People like Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, people who are maybe show up once a generation and can create this shift, this inflection point in human history. But if you ask me, to rely on miracles and to rely on one person a generation to make this kind of shift isn't good enough. The stakes are far too high. There are 1 billion people on this earth who live on $1 a day or less. Those same billion people don't have access to clean drinking water. They can't probably read a newspaper for themselves. So the stakes are far too high for us to rely simply on miracles and simply on those rare few individuals like Gandhi's out there. So what can we do about this problem? We can look at models that have already been attempted. Models have been attempted, for example, by the United Nations. Is anybody familiar with the Millennium Development Goals, by any chance? Yeah? Do you want to share with us what those were, basically? That's right. There's 12 Millennium Development Goals. They were ambitious aspirations, I guess, for human progress that the United Nations set for humanity, basically. And the first of those goals was to have the number of people living on $1 a day or less in this world by the year 2015. So they announced this in 1990. They gave themselves 15 years to accomplish this. A very lofty ambition, but it earned a lot of attention because the United Nations rallied the support of 189 governments. They brought together billions of dollars in capital to make this happen. It seemed as though the United Nations was equipped with the resources, the connections, the capital to actually make this happen. In 2002, they conducted a midway assessment, and these are the results in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, granted, sub-Saharan Africa is the hardest place in the entire world to address the challenge of poverty. But if you can't tell the difference between these two bars, I don't blame you. The percentage of the population living on $1 a day or less in this region went from 44.6% of the population to 44.0% of the population. And in absolute terms, that number went up by 140 million people. Why? Why is it that the United Nations, an organization armed with basically everything that you could possibly ask for to try to address a problem like this, failed? And what does that mean for me at this, at this time? In 1990, I was 3. A 3-year-old kid with at some day, a desire to do something about this problem. Fortunately, there are stories that show the opposite kinds of results. And one of my favorite is. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed an important point. I think that one of the major reasons that the United Nations failed to make a dent in poverty in Africa is they ignored this fundamental human truth that I learned at age 3 with my mom, which is that human beings above all desire to do their own laundry. that when you give somebody something, you disempower them. You eliminate their ability to master their own lives, to be agents in their own lives, to improve their own situation. And that is the flaw that we've seen for the past several decades in terms of international development, a reliance on traditional charity-based models that simply give handouts and don't empower people to take their lives into their own hands. Someone who has done the opposite is this gentleman, Paul Polak. Does anybody know Paul Polak by any chance? He's actually a Colorado native. He lives down the road in Golden, and he's a psychiatrist. And he's moved 24 million farmers out of poverty. And how did he do that? He actually traveled to Bangladesh, to India, to Zambia, to Myanmar, to countries around the world, and walked with farmers through their fields, farmers earning $1 a day or less. He observed them in their natural environment, and he asked them 2 questions. Why are you poor? And what can you do about it? And what he learned was unsurprising. They said they're poor because they don't have enough money. The question, of course, is why don't they have enough money? And the reason is because they make their living from selling crops that they grow on their farms. But those crops, in order to grow them, are dependent on rains that show up 3 to 6 months out of the year. And during the dry season, when there's no rain, there are no crops. It becomes very difficult for a farmer to make a reliable income when they don't have access to rain. So what Paul Polak did is popularize the use of a device called the treadle pump, which is in essence a bamboo stairmaster. We heard a little bit from Linda about her exercise entrepreneurship courses, but it was a similar concept in the sense that you could use this device and get some exercise in the process to pump water from up to 27 feet below the surface. Connect that water to a network of rubber tubing, a drip irrigation system, and you water a ½ acre of land for $25. And the interesting thing is that this device enabled farmers to quadruple their income within 1 year, enabling them to making the difference basically between eking out an existence on $1 a day and sending their kids to school, eating 3 balanced meals a day, having regular health checkups, having a resilient home that protected them from the elements. But what's interesting about Paul Polak's approach is not only that he identified perhaps a root cause of the problem for why farmers can't make money. The interesting thing is what he understood about human beings and laundry. He at first gave away these treadle pumps for free, charitably. And what was interesting is that of the people that he gave these treadle pumps to, 1 out of 4 would use them, 25%, which wasn't very good considering all the efforts that they were putting into manufacturing these devices. So Paul took a different approach. He sold these pumps, charged people for them. He charged them $25, $8 for the pump, $8 to dig the hole, probably, let me do some quick math, $6 or $7 for the network of rubber tubing, the drip irrigation system, $25 for this whole device. And now what he saw is 97% of the people who purchased this device used it. So the remarkable thing here is that when people have the opportunity to invest their own energy, their own resources, their own hard-earned dollars into a solution, they become part of that solution. They become invested in that solution. They become agents in their own lives, people capable of creating whatever they want out of their own lives. And those are entrepreneurs. So that's kind of what brings us here today. And I want to talk a little bit about the Unreasonable Institute. So understanding this interesting trend amongst what was failing and what was succeeding, right? Charity-based models failing, not cutting the job, and entrepreneurial approaches that were empowering people to take their lives into their own hands, actually meeting with success. This group of my friends and I, this group of people, were very curious about this concept. And so all of us attempted at various points in our lives to start different organizations. And the interesting thing is that most of those organizations failed miserably. And what this led us to believe is 2 things. 1, we can't afford to send this next generation of young people into the world without preparing them to tackle its greatest challenges. 2, we're wildly unequipped to go out into this world and start these kinds of organizations, as we learned through our failures. So that's why we decided to start something called the Unreasonable Institute. The idea is very simple. We find brilliant entrepreneurs from around the world who have a crazy idea, who for some reason have the bizarre belief that they can do something about a problem like climate change or the oppression of women or poverty or the lack of energy in places where there's no infrastructure to provide it, etc. help them to build a sustainable model, financially viable model, so that solution can scale to reach at least 1 million people. And the way that we do this is we find 25 brilliant entrepreneurs from around the world and bring them to Boulder for 6 weeks, where we put them all in one house together, a frat house basically in Boulder. And we provide them incubation, mentorship, and training so that their ideas get some legs. Then we support them with access to capital and a community, a network basically, so their ideas take off. And the biggest and most important thing about this model is the mentorship. That these entrepreneurs are learning from people like Paul Polak, people who have achieved the kind of scale and the effectiveness of solution that young people are aspiring to. So people like Paul Polak, like the CTO of HP, like an entrepreneur who started 19 companies and raised $2 billion, the executive producer of Law & Order, are coming in to the Unreasonable Institute to work with these entrepreneurs to do everything from help them to raise capital, to generate revenue, to assemble their teams, to build their brands, to do whatever it takes to create sustainable and scalable solutions to these problems. These entrepreneurs then have the chance to work with consulting partners, get legal advice, design consulting. They have the chance to pitch to several hundred investors to raise capital, both in San Francisco and in Boulder. They have the chance to form relationships with about 30 different investment funds and foundations, and basically to arm them with every resource, every skill, every relationship that they require to go out and create progress. So knowing this, over the past 2 years, we've run this program. Now we have our second class of 25 entrepreneurs at the Institute, and we'll hear from several of these entrepreneurs in just a few minutes. But Bethany and Brian wanted us to share just what we have seen be really important in terms of characteristics for entrepreneurs that succeed. And I really hope, especially during this part of the presentation, that if you feel compelled, that you jump in, that you share whatever it is you'd like to share. You call BS on whatever you want to, but this is simply our observations from what we've seen be really important for entrepreneur success. The first is listening. The first is to start by understanding the person that you're trying to serve. The most important and telling criteria of an entrepreneur who's going to succeed is how well do they know the customer that they're trying to serve. The difference between someone like Paul Polak and the United Nations is exactly this. Paul Polak went to Zambia, he went to Myanmar, he went to India, he talked with farmers in their fields. The United Nations sat in Geneva, Switzerland, and made decisions about policies that would affect farmers thousands of miles away. So imperative to the success of any entrepreneur is, first of all, an understanding of their market. One of our entrepreneurs from last year is a Nigerian farmer. His name is Nameka Ikegwono. And Nigeria is a very difficult country to succeed as an entrepreneur. There's tremendous corruption, there's tremendous crime, there's huge economic disparity, and many NGOs have tried and failed to do something about these problems. And part of the difficulty is that they don't understand the assets that the people that they're trying to serve possess, what they have in their favor, what they can use to actually help themselves. So Nameka, being a farmer, gained an understanding fairly rapidly of what people have access to. And what he understood was being a major problem for these farmers is that they would take their crops to the market and they would have no idea their actual cost. So they wouldn't know how much to sell them for. They would routinely sell them for maybe a third of their actual market value. And so you can imagine if you sold, was it Gordon with the great scanning photo device, right? You said it cost $150. Imagine if every time you made that sale, you sold it for $50 because you had no idea how much it actually cost or how much people would pay for it. That's the situation that these farmers are in. Nameka knew he had to do something about these problems because that disparity in income is, again, the difference between eking out an existence and sending your kids to school. So he knew that education needed to be part of the solution. But these people don't have an understanding of English. They don't have access to mass media like televisions and internet. But they do have one thing, and that is a small 18 kilowatt transistor radio. So what Nameka did is he started a radio show for farmers. And basically what he did is every day he would report to these farmers how much crops cost on the market. Soya bean today costs $3 per kilogram. And these are the weather patterns that you can expect so that you can prepare your farm to meet those conditions. These are the diseases that you might find your livestock being threatened by. These are ways to vary your root depth. These are high yield cash crops that you can grow, etc., to give these farmers a competitive advantage as they went to the market. And what he saw was a 50% increase in income for the average farmer who simply listened to his show for an hour a day. So simply by listening to the people that he was trying to serve, also getting them to listen, Nemeko was able to make a marked difference in their lives. Most of you are probably familiar with Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. Somebody once asked Steve Jobs, Steve, how is Apple such an innovative company? How do you guys time and again come up with the most incredible and brilliant and genius products out there and get so many people so excited about them? And Steve quoted Picasso and said that a good artist copies and a great artist steals. Then he added, Apple is shameless about stealing great ideas. So two of Apple's most famous products, right, are the iPod and iTunes. Does anybody know where the idea for the iPod came from? From what I understood, the inspiration for the idea, or the proof that the market was there for this kind of thing, came from Napster. And so, Steve Jobs and Apple really, they leveraged what they saw already working. They copied great ideas that they knew had success, had traction. And another one of our entrepreneurs from last year was a woman named Jasmine Stein, and she saw that in Afghanistan, women, people of low income, had basically an impossible time escaping the mire of poverty. There was very little that they could do about this problem. There's very little education about something like entrepreneurship through which they could start businesses, generate income, and improve their lives. So what she did is take something that works really well in the United States, reality television. She took the popularity of contests like American Idol, right, or Survivor, or The Real World, and applied that same concept to teaching and mentoring entrepreneurs in Afghanistan. So this time, the drama is not who is sleeping with who, right? It's the entrepreneurial struggle to raise capital, to get customers, to market your product and service, and everything that takes. And this show that she made, featuring several entrepreneurs, including women in full burqas, for example, who defy the Taliban to participate in this program as entrepreneurs, was so popular that it became the #1 hit of the season and had 7 million viewers across the country. 7 million viewers who now completely understand what social entrepreneurship is and many of the elements that are required to go from an idea to implementation on the ground to revenue, profit, and a better life. Does anybody know who this is, by any chance? Yes, sir, Tom. Tim Ferriss, yes. Tim Ferriss is the author of now 2 New York Times bestsellers, The 4-Hour Workweek and The 4-Hour Body. And Tim is an extreme kind of guy. I don't know why I keep referring to these people with their first name like I know them. I don't. So Tim had a very interesting experience. He was once invited to speak at Princeton University to an MBA class. And so he went to Princeton University, and he had a maybe 90-minute talk, and he said, if any of you are interested, I have a challenge. So come see me after this class if you'd like to find out what the challenge is. It has a fabulous prize. So after the class of maybe 300 people, 20 people showed up to hear what this challenge was about. And Tim told them, here's the challenge. The challenge is to reach out to 3 seemingly impossible people to connect with: Oprah, Bill Clinton, and Richard Branson. Whoever makes the most progress in having a conversation with any one of these 3 people will win a round-trip ticket to anywhere you want in the entire world, paid for by me. Awesome. Very, very sweet proposition, and very low risk. So Tim said he would come back the following week and he would investigate who made the most progress, and he would give the prize. So he came back the following week and came back to the same class and asked the 20 students who participated in the challenge what the results of their challenge were. Does anybody have a guess as to how many students attempted this challenge of those 20? 3, 1, 5? All of them? 0. Not a single student attempted this challenge. Not a single student drafted an email that said, "Dear Bill, And if he had or she had, he or she would have won the contest, right? The interesting thing, and what Tim Ferriss argues in this section of his book, in the 4-Hour Workweek, is that people talk themselves so often out of what they convince themselves is A, impossible, and B, something that everybody else around them will do better than them. And that's why he argues that the competition is lowest at the top, at the seemingly impossible to reach standards, right? And that's why when people actually aim for those things and put everything they have behind aspiring to those goals, often they succeed. It's often the people who dare enough to go after an impossible goal who do make progress in realizing it. And one of the interesting experiences that we had at the Unreasonable Institute is through something we call the Unreasonable Marketplace. So the marketplace is part of our selection process for entrepreneurs. The 4 entrepreneurs that are here today went through this process. It's probably a hellish experience they hope never to repeat again. But basically our application process boils down to 3 things. It's a written application, it's an interview, and it's this marketplace. And all the research out there says that interviews, written applications are relatively useless when it comes to selecting people. The only true test of whether somebody's going to be able to do what you want them to do is to ask them to do it. Right? So if you want to hire someone for sales, ask them to sell you something. Look at their sales record. Don't ask them where they see themselves in 5 years or what their greatest weakness is. That doesn't tell you anything that you can actually evaluate their success on. So similarly, we want to select entrepreneurs who can prove that they're entrepreneurial, who can prove they can go out and convince people to part with their hard-earned dollars to send them to the Unreasonable Institute. So this challenge was to raise the $8,000 that it costs to attend the Unreasonable Institute. And the first 25 of our 50 finalists to do so would be the entrepreneurs chosen to attend our 6-week summer institute. And so very interesting process. And when we first started the institute in 2009, when we opened this up to the world, or it was actually January 2010, we had selected 42 finalists. As soon as they came to the stage, they walked. They said, this isn't possible. This is not going to happen. There's too much risk. This has never before been done. You guys aren't going to make this happen. We had people, our mentors, our most trusted advisors say, guys, really, do something much simpler. There's no way that you're going to get somebody like a former child soldier from Liberia to raise thousands of dollars to come to the Unreasonable Institute in Boulder. But the remarkable thing was that despite all that hesitation at the beginning, in fact, this was a huge success. We actually challenged the entrepreneurs to raise $200,000 this year from 4,000 people in 50 days. That was the challenge. The results were raising $216,000 from 3,950 people in 36 days. And these guys are the heroes behind that story. They're the people who did it. But the remarkable thing is they're the people who took that seemingly impossible challenge and did this. And one of the entrepreneurs you'll hear from, Moses, is someone who had to walk 17 kilometers to use the internet. And he still managed to do this, which blows my mind. I can't comprehend how amazing that is for someone like Moses to do it. But he went for it, and he didn't let anything stop him. And so he's here today in this room. The next thing I want to talk about is failure as being a very important piece of being a successful entrepreneur. Some of the best entrepreneurs out there are people who have an appetite, a hunger, a strong desire to constantly fail again and again and again. That might be because they're masochists, but it's also perhaps because they realize it's the only way to learn. Does anybody know who this man is? Tom Watson, yes, the founder of IBM. And interesting story about Tom Watson. He once had an executive in his company who he had just recently hired blow $10 million. So this person made a decision on Friday afternoon. No one was in the office. He couldn't consult his teammates. He was brand new to the organization. And he had the ability to make the go-ahead. He was supposed to get everybody else's feedback and insight. He didn't. He made the decision. He made the wrong decision, and he cost IBM $10 million in 15 minutes. So obviously he wasn't feeling very good about himself when he showed up in the office on Monday morning, and the receptionist said that Tom was waiting for him in his office. So this executive goes to the office, and he sits down in the chair in front of Tom, hanging his head low in shame and guilt. And Tom's like, "What's the matter?" And he says, "I blew $10 million. You're about to fire me." And Tom says, "Fire you? why would I fire you? I just spent $10 million on your education. And so what's remarkable about people like Tom is they understand the importance of failure, right, in learning the right things to do. Very often, knowing what the right thing to do is also about knowing what the wrong thing is to do. And for us, one of the big lessons also came from the marketplace. When we first started the Unreasonable Institute, we opened up this marketplace to the world in a very public way. I mean, we got press from the Wall Street Journal and Business Week, who all advertised this marketplace, this crazy idea out to the world. And then on launch day, probably 3,000 people from maybe 40 or 50 different countries showed up on the marketplace. And not unlike the American marketplace, it crashed completely. It totally didn't work. People's donations were lost. Their credit card information was potentially unsecure. Just horrible things were happening. I suddenly got like 50 emails a day in my inbox that said things like, we had so much excitement and respect for what you guys were trying to do, and now we have lost all faith in you. This is an incredibly unprofessional organization. If you can't manage a simple website, how are you going to teach these entrepreneurs to create world-changing impact in a 6-week summer program? You're not. People suddenly started saying, you guys aren't going to make it. This isn't going to work. So in this situation, maybe we banked a little bit on this idea that people understand that failure is an education, and we did the only thing that we could, which is we totally took responsibility. We emailed every single visitor to the marketplace, every single entrepreneur who was participating, and said, look guys, we messed up. We thought that we were prepared. We thought that we were ready to handle this volume. We thought that we had the site secure, that it was well built, that its foundation was solid. In fact, we were wrong. We really apologize because we understand the struggles these entrepreneurs are going through to raise this capital. And here are the 3 steps that we're going to take to rectify this. We're firing our developer. We're hiring a new one. We're doing these couple other things. We're getting Amazon payments to secure these payments, etc. What was amazing is the response. The same people who had vilified us maybe 2 days ago for this unbelievable failure were sending us poems by Rudyard Kipling to inspire us through this difficult time. They were telling us if we needed help with web programming, they knew people who could help us. They were telling us that if they appreciated our honesty, they appreciated what we were trying to do, and they had our full support. So what's remarkable, what we've learned often, is that by sharing your failures, your vulnerabilities, you become more human. And in so doing, you build a relationship with people that they really appreciate, a trust with people that they really appreciate and respect. And that fundamentally, entrepreneurs are people who understand this about failure and who are able to be transparent about that failure. And the final characteristic that we've seen as very important for entrepreneurs is persistence. Some of you may be familiar with Pepe Le Pew, the romantic French-speaking skunk. And if you need a refresher, Pepe Le Pew is this cartoon skunk who fell in love with this beautiful cat. And he would go after her constantly without stopping, giving her flowers, reciting poetry to her, giving her chocolates. And it paid off for him every once in a while. And the interesting thing is that to engage the kinds of people that we were hoping to bring together at the Unreasonable Institute, that persistence was something that was unbelievably important to us. I talked to you about some of the mentors that we tried to bring to the Institute. One of them is someone who's founded a couple of companies. She's an impact investor. She was recently chosen as one of Fast Company's 50 most creative people in the world. And I had to email her 10 times after having a conversation with her before she would respond. And here's the email I sent her. Joy, please forgive me for emailing you yet again, but here at the Unreasonable Institute, we really value persistence in the face of potential failure, and we would just be so thrilled to have you as a mentor this summer. Let me know if you might have some spare time to join us. And on the 10th email, the 10th attempt, she finally wrote back, persistence is a true value. I had actually just forgotten to write you back that I was willing. Count me in. And so what was remarkable about this experience is that continuously going after the things you're seeking, not taking no for an answer, has been one of the things that we found most valuable in our process, in our experience. So I just want to close with a thought from the Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw, who once said that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man and woman, of course. And if he's right, if George Bernard Shaw is right, we can't afford not to bet on unreasonable people, on people who are crazy enough to attempt the impossible, who will persist no matter what failure looms ahead of them, who are willing to ignore skeptics, and who are willing to redefine history, to be those inflection points in our world. So with that, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Introduce yourself, and then we'll open up the floor for questions.
Imagine a young man who was born in one of the poorest villages in the world, first put on shoes at age 13, first saw television at age 15, and was the first graduate in his entire clan, sitting in front of a panel of entrepreneurs in Boulder. Can you imagine that to be possible? Yes, it is possible. And I am the young man. My name is Moses Sanga from Uganda. Uganda is in East Africa. And I'm the founder and CEO of a company called EcoFuel Africa Limited, which makes clean charcoal, a clean cooking fuel that is sustainable, affordable, that is an alternative to wood fuel in Africa, and is a solution to deforestation. And we use part of our proceeds to plant trees. Our dream is to give at least 40 million sub-Saharan Africans access to clean energy and plant at least 250 million trees by the year 2020. Thank you.
Hi, is this on? Okay. Hi, my name is Sabah Gul, and I'm working with young girls in Pakistan. My work is inspired by the girl child, not the girl child that you see around you in this country, but the girl child that I've seen in Pakistan, the girl child who has to struggle throughout her childhood and her teenage years to be allowed a very basic education. So there are girls that I've seen, millions of girls across the country, who have to work instead of going to school so that they can feed their families and contribute to their family income. So these are girls that are working at carpet looms, working at leather factories, working in cotton farms for 14 to 15 hours every single day, which means that there's no time left to go to school. So that's the girls that we're working with, and what we're doing is we are giving them an incentive to come to school. We're turning their classwork into income and then marketing their skills to big cities across the country. And so they come to school, they learn regular English, math, science, but then they also attend our skills class, where they get to learn something and get to market it, and then they get paid for the time that they spend in school. So it's a way to bring them to school. It's a way to help them break the cycle of poverty and illiteracy. At the moment, we're working with 30 girls, and we are teaching them embroidery and needlework and turning their work into handbags. And this is one of the handbags that we've made. It's one of the first line of handbags. And so the idea is to help them get an education while also making an income, so that they can change their lives and the lives of their future generations.
Hello, my name is Thiago Dalvi. I'm the CEO and founder of Solidarium Fairtrade. Our idea is basically to get Brazilian local producers out of poverty by connecting them with major retailers. Brazil, there's actually now more than 2 million local producers living with less than $2 a day. So they usually have a great technique of production, but they have no idea on how to sell their products. So our idea is quite simple. It's just to make a connection, right, with these producers and the market. So our idea started like 5 years ago. We're now in partnership with the top 5 retailers in Brazil, such as Walmart, JCPenney, and we sell these kind of products. So this is 100% made by upcycled materials from the Fiat plant, the automobile company. And the idea is to connect these local producers and increase their income by production. So basically, this is what Solidarium does.
Hi, I'm Trisha Compass, and I'm from San Francisco, California. And I went to school in San Luis Obispo, Central Coast of California, at Cal Poly, and I studied civil engineering. And I was actively involved with the Engineers Without Borders group there. And I was working on a water treatment project in Thailand. And right around that time, the Asian tsunami happened. That was about 6 years ago. And I think most of you may remember that. And after that tsunami, 140,000 people were killed. But of those, 85,000 died of waterborne illnesses. So that really inspired me to continue my education, get my master's, and see, could I help, partner with people and come up with an idea of a personal water device that could be deployed after a major disaster that could actually, we could save their lives. So I spent my thesis, and I extended it for about 3 years trying to develop a solution, and I co-invented the Day One water bag. Oops, got a little stuck. And it's kind of, if you can imagine, it's a little bit like an oversized Camelback bladder, but there's some pretty unique features with it, and so you can collect water, treat it, transport, and store it all in one unit, which is a big thing in a disaster, so you don't have a lot of components. And so this one bag can treat 10 liters of water in one batch, providing a family of 4 with 10 days of clean drinking water before a larger sustainable system is in place. So after I got my master's, I founded Day One Response in California, but we're trying to work around the world. We've worked in Nicaragua, worked with the U.S. Navy and Thai Marines in Thailand, and then just recently in Haiti to provide these bags, particularly to vulnerable populations.
All right, what was the time period in your life, you're all very young, that you decided that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? And what was the thing that convinced you that it was worth taking that step forward?
Okay, I'll start this off. It was far from my mind, being an entrepreneur, especially studying engineering. And engineering, when I first was deciding to go to school, was also far from my mind. But I think what it was, I grew up in South Korea when I was in elementary school, and I think what it was being open to possibilities, kind of seeing things as not putting a limit to them. And so being exposed to different cultures, different people, different poverty levels, and knowing that just because I'm, maybe from the US and given something and, somebody sitting next to me is from another country, what are the possibilities? Can we create a relationship? What can we do? So I think I didn't know what entrepreneurship was. And as I went through college, got exposed to, I think it's just knowing that there are a lot of possibilities out there, and it's not just about me, but how can we work together?
Yeah, for me, actually, if you see my parents and my grandparents, they all were entrepreneurs, and was a kind of a natural path, for my life. So in my house, in my home, we were always talking about, their business, and so for me, it was a blend of opportunity and an option. So I went to college, and when I was finishing my college, I came to the US for an internship, and then I came back to Brazil. I was invited to start working in an NGO called the Entrepreneurial Alliance, and what we realized was that all of those micro-entrepreneurs that this organization was helping, they had this great technique, but they had no idea on how to sell. So for me, it was basically a blend of option and opportunity. Yeah. And when I started, actually, I was 20 years old, so I had no idea on how to start it, and we had no idea that we would accomplish. So imagine a 20-year-old boy sitting in front of Walmart CEO and negotiated partnership with them. That's what we did, and I think that worked. We're now with 373 stores all over Brazil selling our products, and this is what you just mentioned. You have to think that the impossible is possible, and yeah, that's it.
I'm also going to say that being an entrepreneur was not in the cards for me. It wasn't something I thought about and planned at all. I was actually still in school. I was doing my master's. I also did engineering as an undergrad and for my master's. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time. The point in time that I go back to when I think about what really inspired me to think about doing what I'm doing now was a story that I heard And the story was of a girl, a young girl, who grew up in Afghanistan as a boy for 12 years. And so she masked herself as a boy so she could attend school, because she grew up in the time of the Taliban when girls weren't allowed to go to school. And so she changed her name, and she cut her hair, and she changed her dress, and she did everything she could for those 12 years, supported by her parents in this decision. And obviously when she hit puberty, she was 12, she was confused. She was supposed to marry a man, but she thought she was a boy. And so just that struggle of a young girl who had to go through so much just so she could get a basic education was such a mind opener for me at that time, because here I was from Pakistan, I was born and raised there, but I was sitting at MIT with an engineering bachelor's and doing my master's, and just thinking about how huge the contrast was between her life and my life. And I probably at her age was doing everything I could to not be made to go to school, and making excuses and telling my mom I was sick and whatever I could do. And by a chance of a good fortune and a good family and the means to attend a good school, here I was at one of the top schools in the country. And so I went back and I said, the organization, the founder of the organization that started the schools we're working with at the moment, I told her I want to go back and I want to visit your schools and meet the girls and talk to them and see what you're doing. And so I went there and I saw some amazing work that they were doing, but I also saw the very discouraging trend that we're hoping to change now, which is the trend of girls dropping out as they get older. And by older, I just mean 12 or 13 or 14, which is the age at which they should be in school. And they're standing at this crossroads, trying to pick where to go in life. And so that was the age at which they started dropping out. And so that was a trend that I just started brainstorming how to change, came back to my school, applied for some grants, had this idea, proposal that we had. And then similar to Tiago, I found myself sitting in front of about 30 to 40 Afghan men, Afghan refugees who were in Pakistan, talking to them about this idea we had to bring their girls to school. And a lot of them didn't speak Urdu. There was a translator, and I was only 24, and it was intimidating, but at the same time I got a great response, and it was a win-win situation for these people. And here we are now, a year and a half later, and we just launched our first line, and it's sold out, and people are really excited about the idea, and we have 30 girls and a lot more who want to come to school.
Well, where should I start? Well, when you're born in an area like where I was born, the only way you can make it in life is to be unreasonable. I was born in a family where nobody had ever gone to school, and my father did not value going to school. So I had to choose to go to school or be like anyone else. But my dad gave me two options. You can stay here and graze cows and be like everyone else, or you can choose to stay in school and take care of yourself. So that I had to grow up quickly. I come from a nomadic tribe in Africa, so we had milk. I know everything about cows. I have a PhD in taking care of cows. So the only resource available to me was milk. So I had to figure out, how do I survive with this milk and stay in school when my dad doesn't want me to go to school. That is how I became an entrepreneur. I got a gel can, a small gel can of 5 liters. I'll take milk. I'll wake up very early in the morning, milk the cows, and take a gel can with me at school and sell it to my fellow kids who had money. And that I would raise enough money because kids in Africa are not served food. So kids would get hungry at lunchtime, and I would have my plastic cup. You want a cup of milk? You give me money first. And I would do that. That is how my entrepreneurship spirit started. That is my first company. It was never registered, but it took me through school. But what I am doing now, it is a story that happened to me in 2009. I used to work for a local microfinance, and that took me away from my family for a long time. Now in 2009, I traveled back to see my mother. On my way home, I met my sister, who is about 12 years old, and she was carrying a bundle of firewood on her head. When she saw me, she started crying. She told me, today is a Wednesday. I missed school on Monday, and I traveled for 10 kilometers to go in a nearby trading center to buy firewood. Today is a Wednesday. I've also missed school, and I'm traveling for another 10 kilometers. I can't keep doing this. seeing her cry as a young, little, beautiful girl broke my heart. I'm also human like everyone else. But I didn't know anything about how to make clean charcoal. I studied business administration. I'm an accountant by profession. So I had to figure out how should I help my family, how should I help my sister to stay in school, because I know how hard it is in Africa. So I made research, and God helped me find a new solution. And I'm now providing clean, sustainable, and affordable energy to all people in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's how I discovered. Thank you.
Okay, who has a question? Thank you. If you have a question, raise your hand. Please introduce yourself when you ask the question.
Hi, I'm Scott Duty, and I used to work for Motorola, and I understand a little bit about Brazil, and I have a question for you that's directly related to the financial conditions of the United States right now. In Brazil, if you want to sell something there, you must manufacture it there. Would you explain to me how that model works from your own perspective and from whatever U.S. perspective you may have?
We're kind of moving from a situation where Brazil were really closed for internal gods, manufacturing gods. So what I think what is happening now is that, for example, Solidarium model basically works only with local producers located in Brazil. And I think that Brazilians used to value what is made inside the country. So we do have that culture, So what we try to do in Solidarium is to tell this story. So each single product, for example, of Solidarium comes with a unique ID. And with this ID, people can track and trace all the network and all the chain of each product. So you can see who was the producer, what price we paid for that producer, what raw materials were used, which distribution channel we used to sell that product. But answering your question, what I think is that Brazilians used to value what is local and what is made inside the country. And we actually have some problems with tax, and it's really expensive to import something from outside the country. And as you probably know, for example, Brazil, if you import a car or a cell phone, the price that you paid for that product will be double, And so if you pay like $100 here in the US and you import the same cell phone to Brazil, you'll pay $200 or maybe $300 for the same product in Brazil. So we have these kind of problems, but I think that our economy is really strong because of that. So US passed through a great crisis and Brazil don't. So we're now the 7th greatest economy in the world because of that. So we really focus on our internal economy and our development and our production, and yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Steve Baker. I'm a senior fellow here at the DaVinci Institute. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been building companies and blowing them up all my life. Thank you so much for being here. And first of all, everybody's English is incredible. Secondly, I love how everybody pronounces the word entrepreneur differently. And I don't know if you all know that actually it's an old French word that means too stubborn and stupid to quit. So that's why we're all here. Here's my question to all of you, though, because I think that entrepreneurship really is the foundation of building freedom around the world, because it opens up so much doors to different ways that people can get education, they can get water, they can get things like that. However, in looking back and taking entrepreneurship back into your countries and back into the turmoil that exists around the world, number one, in the hideous oppression of women through either culture or religion, of either not being allowed to be into the business community or even into the life community from that standpoint, how do we take entrepreneurship and take small businesses to create a cultural change?
It is a really good question. what we do is that, Tiju just mentioned that you really need to empower people. Solidarium is now working with 1,600 workers. It's about 44 local producers distributed in 12 states. And 95% of them are women. And why women? Mainly because women, they used to value, their child education, the health of their family, their house, and everything related to their community. So what we did was to try to find these people on those communities and empower them and qualify them and give them tools for them to grow. So that's what Solidarium has been doing. And I think that the women is really a key for a next generation, for especially, that's what's happening in Brazil. Yeah.
So with Bliss, my enterprise, obviously we're working with girls and women. And one of the notions that I actually want to dispel, in my answer is the perception that, that men don't want their women to make money. They do. Because the women that we're working with, they're already working, they're already contributing a very significant portion of their household income. They're working at carpet looms, for example, in our case. And so, the way that we enter these communities and the way that we sort of foster our ideas or our, sort of model into the community is, we went through the men. So the first meeting we had was, I didn't go and speak to the girls and women. I met the girls in the schools and saw the problem, but the first thing I did was, we had a meeting and I met with all the fathers. I met with the elders of the community who, the first thing they did was they condoned the idea. They said, yes, this is good for our girls. They're going to make money. They're going to get an education. They're going to learn a skill. Send your girls to school. So that was the first step. And then the second thing that I'm going to say is the biggest shock that I got in working with the community was the realization that there's a hunger for education and there's a hunger for lifting yourself out of poverty in this community. And even though we're working with communities that are very conservative, and there's definitely a chunk of families that will, for example, never want to send their girls to school because of cultural barriers. But what I learned was that percentage was much, much smaller than the percentage that wanted to send their girls to school, that wanted to do whatever they could, whether it was, learning a skill, being an entrepreneur, going to school, whatever it may take for the families to change their futures. And so that's the majority of my experience working with a very conservative refugee community in Pakistan. I think every poor person wants to, all you have to do is make them believe that what you're doing is really, I think it takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of building bonds. And what we did was we worked with an NGO on the ground that had been working already in that area for 16 years. They were the ones that built the schools. So their staff and their teachers and the school was very trusted. So you have to go through channels that are already have established trust, and you have to make the poor man believe that this is something that is going to be beneficial for them. Because when it comes to education, it's always about what is in it for me. And so what we've done is we've incentivized it through a market-based solution, through an entrepreneurial approach to education. And so that's what I'm going to say, that I think every family, whether poor or rich, really wants to dream of a brighter future. And if you approach it the right way, you can change that culture and make a difference.
I'm going to be general. In Africa, we've had so many political problems, one group getting rid of the other. I'm going to be general. Why I chose entrepreneurship? At one stage in time, I was so confused and I didn't know what to do because I was seeing so many problems in my society. I actually tried to become a politician, but I realized that I wasn't going to solve problems in my society by going into politics because, politics had failed. So I had to find an alternative. Why entrepreneurship? The biggest problem in society is to have people who don't have a job, who don't have what to eat, who have nothing to lose. The most dangerous young man is a young man without a job and who has nothing to lose. He can do anything. That is the problem in Africa. So why entrepreneurship? When you start a business, you create jobs for people. When you employ one young man, he has about a chain of 5 others that he supports. He has a sister, like in Africa, I pay school fees for my sister. you have empowered an entire generation. Politics has failed to do this in Africa. That's why I think entrepreneurship. Let's try entrepreneurship and see what happens.
Okay, I'll just take maybe two quick points just to echo the fellows as well, is that when I was working in Haiti, I could see that everybody was an entrepreneur. Set up stores, selling mangoes, selling firewood, and I had no idea that this water device could have the potential to stir up ideas of how could they use this. Because I'm really focused on this is for disaster, just to get somebody through the next couple of days. But talking to the community, they said, I could sell this water at one of these stands. How about building a factory here? You can employ me. And I mean, there was just hundreds of ideas as we trained people. So having that would just kind of blew me away. Think, wow, I was so focused on getting, making sure this could get somebody through first day, second day, but they're thinking, how's this going to create my future? And then taking it on the other side of, all of us are trying to create, a sustainable small business. And then how can we do that when there's big players who could potentially squash us? And I think a lot of it is just about I think Saba said, what's in it for me? And so creating those partnerships. I work with Procter & Gamble, the U.S. military, and a manufacturing firm, Cascade Designs, and it's really about what's in it for them and how can they not, why would they not want to work with us and what we're doing? So a lot about sharing your story. So kind of flipping it to being, that we're all, in a sense, a small business, but how can we really show the power of our story?
My name's Brian. Quick question for the group here. They say that the relationship between an entrepreneur and their business is like the relationship between a mother and their child. Given that, what are your dreams for your businesses when they grow up?
I think actually that's a really good analogy is to give it wings. Something that the Unreasonable Institute does is can I grow my business? Can I get hundreds of thousands of these water bags out there to save lives, but to the point where I can almost let go? But not saying I'm done with the business, but can I work on other aspects beyond water? So kind of it is very much a baby of ours, and how can I start to let it go, let other people come in, have other ideas? And so I think for me, my dream is to just facilitate a lot of new ideas, particularly in the vulnerable populations and disasters, but move it beyond water, knowing that through this first product, we can get it out there. But I think it's just a great, I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine that it's very hard as you go through the different stages.
Yeah, my big dream is to get these 2 million local producers out of poverty. Yeah. Being practical, so what are you doing now, right? We're working with 1,600 local producers. Within 2 years, we increased their income by 80%. And what we're looking for now is to bring out our model to the US. So today we were just sending an email to the Walmart VP here in the US and trying to schedule a meeting, and why not to bring our model here and maybe start with Walmart e-commerce. So my big dream is to get these 2 million local producers out of poverty, and maybe why not later start replicating our model in other countries. So why not Africa? Why not India? Why not China? And what is really nice between these relationship here is that we already started talking with Moses, with Anna, which is an entrepreneur in China. So we already started create bonds, between each other, and so that's it.
I'm just going to say, I think the reason that that's such a great analogy is because that's exactly the dream that a parent has for their child is exactly the dream that all of us have for our ventures, which is, we want to hold on, we want to keep them, we want to, nurture them, but at the same time, what's best for them is for us to be able to see them grow into, independent individuals. And so that's exactly the dream I have for Bliss. I want it to be, the kind of businesses that we're building in communities that are sending girls to school, I want them to be completely self-sustaining. I want the women and the girls to own it and to enable education for them themselves without me being there, without me holding their hand, without me doing anything for them. And that's the dream I have. And I don't have a limit at all to the number of girls that we want to scale up to. I mean, millions, more than that, however many girls need to go to school. I don't have a limit.
Well, I liked the description. It really feels like seeing your baby grow. I work with farmers. I invented 2 machines. One is a kiln that I lease to a farmer and teach them how to turn their agricultural waste into biochar. Every time I go to a farmer and he tells me, this is what I'm doing with my kiln. I've made some of the biochar I make has improved my crop yields. And the money you give me from buying the biochar I make, I've managed to buy a dress for my girl. I feel humbled. And when I see these young women who have kiosks that distribute our charcoal to the final consumer, tell me their stories, how their lives have improved, I feel like I've really lived my, I've made a contribution. There's that emotional attachment, and it is very, very enticing. You may not want to let go. But then everything has to go on. I can't live forever. So my dream is to see my company continue from Uganda to another country, and I know I can't be there to do everything. So I've already set a succession plan, who will take over, and I know I'm not the best CEO in the world, so empowering others would be the best thing to take this company ahead.
So social entrepreneurship, right, would be defined your enterprises. There's a lot of discussion of what social entrepreneurship is. In 6 words or less, define what social entrepreneurship is. And you can think about that when we get a break.
Okay, hi, Linda again. What are the 3 most important things that each of you did to move from concept stage to making this a reality? Thank you.
I'm going to say that being bold. I mean, I quit my 6-figure salary job in the US, and I decided one day to just go back to Pakistan and work on this. So for me, it was really about taking a bold step and not being afraid.
For me, it's definitely taking risk. When we started Solidarium, we started as a store in a shopping mall, and we had no idea on how to manage a store. We had no recognized brand, and we had nothing actually. And we're here. So take the first step.
For me was test often and test a lot, and do that as quick as you can, and you might be able to see the concept into a product if that's where you're going, or you might go a much different path.
And Teju, you can go ahead and add into this one too. You're an entrepreneur.
I suppose so. For us, it was building relationships. It was really. We call ourselves pathological collaborators, really standing on the shoulders of giants, of other people who have done great things that we can build off of. And I think a lot of that boils down to the way that you treat people, the way that you listen to them. We talk about treating someone you're talking to like they're the messiah in the room. Like there is nobody in the entire world who would rather talk to than this person. And that's how you build a movement. You do that with one person, and you do it with another person, you do it with another person, and so forth. And so for us, I think that was the most important thing in finding incredible people like these 4.
Moses, go ahead.
Me, I would say it was team building. I didn't have all the skills, and I didn't even have money. But I managed to attract 4 young boys to join my dream, and I had only $500. That couldn't even buy a machine, couldn't do anything. And I knew I couldn't even pay them. But I managed to inspire them to come, and we built a strong team. And when people so young people, so dedicated to solving problems, they bought our dream and they joined us. The government even recognized our efforts and gave us a grant of $10,000. But we started with nothing.
All right, so let's give it up for these awesome entrepreneurs from